Okay, I think we are live. So, good evening, everyone. The H1B Guy here, and tonight we come to you for another round of the H1B Guy Live, Stamp It Out. And this is our second episode. And before we get started, if you haven't already, I'd like to ask you to make sure that you're subscribed to the H1B Guy here on YouTube and that you click like right now for this live stream. It helps the live stream get noticed and picked up by a broader audience on YouTube, and just would greatly appreciate that. But tonight I have a very special guest. I am joined by Rational Woman, and that's at Ration Woman on Twitter. And, I have had the opportunity to befriend her roughly about a month ago. I caught one of her comments on Twitter and I responded to it. And, literally the following and the followers that I received just from that was just truly amazing. So here's someone that is very well respected, in the community. And that community that I'm referring to is, the Greencard backlog community. Those that are actively advocating for Senate Bill 386. And, so her and I started interacting and, began talking and just chatting. And I asked her if she would come on. And so I'm just so excited to introduce her tonight. But before we get into the questions and answer that we're going to do, I just wanted to let anyone know that if you have questions for us, you can post those in the YouTube chat. We'll get to them at the very end. But the format for tonight is going to be that I'm going to ask Rational Woman 10 questions in my version of Stamp It Out to her, and then she's going to turn around and ask me about 8 questions in her version of Stamp It Out to me. And then I think we had 9 questions come in from Twitter, and then any other questions that we, get tonight from YouTube. So, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Rational Woman. How you doing tonight?
I'm great, thank you. Thanks for the intro.
Absolutely, and so glad to have you join me. And what I want to do now, I just want to get right to the questions because you'll be able to introduce yourself. And kind of let our audience know, who you are. So I'm just going to get right to the first question, and that's really, what I want to ask everyone here in the Stamp It Out series, and that's, tell me your story. Where are you from, and how did you come to the U.S.?
Mm-hmm. I'm actually from southern part of India. I accompanied my husband here 10 years ago. He had a job offer here, and his employer has sent me here. Later, I did my master's in computer science here, and he did his master's here. Right now, I'm a full-stack software engineer. I'm a pure software person with complete SDLC experience. I'm currently working in energy industry.
And when did you come to the U.S. originally?
Around 2011, February.
February of 2011.
Mm-hmm. Close to 10 years.
Yeah. If you could go back and give yourself, one piece of advice before you came to the U.S., what would that be?
That's an interesting question. In general, I would say I would have more focused on my language skills, like the English, because I had really hard time with the southern accent. I lived in Atlanta for some time. I really had a hard time. But in general, if you ask me on the immigration, I would say like completely expect the unexpected. So when I first came to US, at that time, around that time, the average time period for an Indian national to get Greencard is like 4 to 5 years. My sister was here, she got her Greencard in 4 to 5 years. So I was like thinking maybe around that. I mean, it would be the same with me, but over
Hmm.
the years, it's so as I said, like I should have been more prepared for completely expect the unexpected. I said,
Mm.
and maybe apply the green card from day one. Like even though
Mm.
like we did everything we can do to apply early, but I think maybe still even more. Like there is a time period when my lawyer has delayed, or maybe we would have pushed even more. Like even one day would matter, right?
Mm. It does. When did your sister come to the U.S.?
Oh, she came, so her husband came in 2004 and she came in 2008.
Hmm.
Their date was 2011, but they got green card in 2000. Oh, their date was 2007 and they got the green card in 2011. That's like they got it in 4 years.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you look at when he entered originally, and I'm assuming it was under his employment-based sponsorship, he entered in 2004.
Mm-hmm.
And we really begin to see the pileup that started after 2010.
Yes.
For perm laborers that were certified after
Mm-hmm.
2010. I mean, and you see that right now with the current visa
Yes.
bulletins. So that's interesting that as you talked about, days really separating filings and priority dates and things like that, and just what that impact is. So no, also very interesting on the language. The Southern drawl, I think, can be very difficult to understand. Um, yeah, no, I'm not surprised by that at all. Um, so you've been very vocal on Twitter about the need for reform. What
Mm-hmm.
is it that you are fighting for?
So why would anyone want to come to America? Because America is all about freedom, fairness, justice. It's a land of opportunity, right? So that is how we came here. Our fight, basically, people who are in green card backlog, our fight is for dignity we deserve. We earned it. Over the years that we lived here, we contributed. This fight is for fairness. It's not an entitlement, but we're seeking the justice for the prime years we have spent here. We have like it is not like we are asking something illegal or something. We have only continued to stay here after our immigration petitions has been approved. That is, our I-140 has been approved.
Right.
So we have friends here, we have human bondings here. We left one home. Again, leaving another home is not an option for us. I said,
Mm-hmm.
so I want to mention this. So fortunately, many of us, like the backlog folks, mainly from India, we are not running away from regime or communist countries. Okay, that's a fortunate part. The country where I came from is biggest democracy. It's not about question of going back. I can go back. I have tons of opportunities. As you might know, as a recruiter, all major IT companies has their offices in India. It's not about the opportunities. So this fight is about the justice and the dignity we deserve, right? I have confidence in America. If not here, where can we get it, right? If we, I
Mm.
mean, like, if not here, where can we in any other part of the world? So this fight is for our dignity. We, in general, humans are not like user those. We need to be treated as humans, right? So it's not like, okay, being here, okay, we live approve your immigrant petition, but now we ask you to leave, you have to leave. It's not like that. Like humans are not like I have to disagree with Imran. So people are not sum of zeros. They're humans.
Mm-hmm.
They're individuals. They're not use and throws. They're humans. That's it. So our fight is mainly for dignity and for the
Mm-hmm.
fairness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and you talk about America. I mean, we've always heard growing up here, land of the free, home of the brave, right? And you talk about that freedom, and democracy in general, right? And, very, very interesting points. Um, so the concept, kind of continuing on this, the concept of human
Mhm.
rights
Mhm.
harbors sort of negative connotations, right?
Mhm.
Do you foresee the current green card backlog as a humanitarian crisis with abuse of your rights?
I would say, like, so let's first talk about what are the basic human rights. The basic human rights is dignity, fairness, equality, respect, and independence. So
Mm-hmm.
even if you see the UN Convention of the Human Rights Amendments, the first point is living with dignity is the basic human right. As I mentioned before, this is fight for dignity. So though we have been living here, or like I know, like people have lived here for 10 years, living here for 10 years. Right? I might be only 20 years. I might be here only for 10 years. But there have been
Mm-hmm.
people living here for 20 years.
Right.
So living here for 10 to 20 years, we're not able to exercise any of the rights provided by the Constitution of the land where we live, and the law of
Mm-hmm.
the land we follow every day.
Mm-hmm.
That's the basic violation of our right? So it
Mm-hmm.
is like it is like we are like living like a second class citizen. We think
Mm-hmm.
like second class citizens has much rights. So
Mm-hmm.
if you see throughout the history where any civil war breakouts in the world is like, for example, when one set of the people has been treated as second-class citizens, that's when the civil war break out in the country, right? Like, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I'll give you an example like Sri Lanka, where the one set of people don't have the basic rights. So I mean, that's the leading that's the prime point which would lead to the humanitarian crisis. Right
Mm-hmm.
now, I feel like I mean, like, we feel like right now I feel like we're being treated as like second class because we can't exercise any rights in
Mm-hmm.
the land where we live in, which means like kind of like second class citizens.
Mm-hmm.
So, uh, yeah, as said, like, for example, I'll give you, so the primary applicant is tied to the employer, right?
Right.
He's been tied forever. I mean, like, and the dependents to the primary applicants are tied to the primary applicants
Right.
forever, right? If there is like any domestic violence happening in the houses, see, I mean, I know like people would be talking negative about this, but there, you would not say any community without domestic violence or something like that. There could be domestic issues that's happening, but the
Mm-hmm.
dependent is completely tied to the primary applicant. So
Right.
all this is like I would say this is all like let's say a pregnant person who's being employed right now in H1B. She would have to worry more about her job than I mean like it's very hard, like it's very challenging to maintain the status. So
Mm-hmm.
all these are sticking to the same employer no matter what in your life for 10 to 20 years. All these are like humanitarian crises. So I
Mm-hmm.
would like to ask you, because you've been a recruiter, can you,
Yes.
when you're tying up or sticking up with an employer for years, and
Mm-hmm.
by especially when employer know you can't leave job easily if you have to
Mm-hmm.
leave, or like I mean if you leave the job you have I mean if you lose the job you have to leave the country within 10 days. Do you think there would not be any sort of exploitation by some bad employers or like some employers? So.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you talk about second class citizen, right? I mean, and there's other terms that are thrown out there. I mean, indentured servitude, right? Tech
Mm-hmm.
slave is a term that's thrown out there. But I
Mm-hmm.
think when we talk about, the hierarchy of what the H1B is, and then we get into that percentage of H1B holders that are in the green card backlog, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and what those numbers look like. If you start to point back to where individuals have an issue, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
really talking about folks that have perm labor that is 2010 or later.
Mm-hmm.
I think the current visa bulletin's July. It didn't move, right? The August and September were the same. Um,
2009.
yeah, or 2009, sorry. So yeah, I mean that's if you look at what does that tell me, right? Let's go back
Mm-hmm.
and kind of backtrack on those dates, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
is, most of those perm labor filings then that were certified at
Mm-hmm.
2009, let's just say August 2009 and after, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so those individuals typically, if we backtrack that, are folks that arrived in the country somewhere between what, 2005, 2006,
Mm-hmm.
2007, 2008, right? Folks that
Mm-hmm.
worked in as an H1B for 12, 24, 36 months before their perm labor was even initiated, right? And so,
Mm-hmm.
you're talking now about people who have been in this country for 15 years. And, you got into you mentioned the I-140 component, right? I know some
Mm-hmm.
folks that have 4 and 5 I-140s with different employers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because in order to port that priority date, you have to be recertified by the current employer you're working under, and just the
Mm-hmm.
issues that creates, right? What it
Mm-hmm.
does is it becomes the never ending circle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
while you have an approved I-140,
Mm-hmm.
you're still working under H1B visa, and you're still having to file in 12, 24, and 36-month increments depending on who you work for. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you are a permanent employee of an enterprise organization and they hold your H1, yeah, file for 36 months. But
Mm-hmm.
folks that are working on third-party end client sites are lucky to get 12 months approval right now. And these are folks with I-140 approvals, priority dates of February 2011. And so, well, why is that? And then we start to look at the money involved, right? Because
It's true.
that's really what it comes down to, right? Because if
Yes.
you talk about and look at what the cost of a filing fee is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Filing fees, double that amount, just what it costs to file, right? Government
Mm-hmm.
filing fees. You
Mm-hmm.
double that amount, and that will give you what the total cost is, because doubling that amount really is the attorney fees or the employee fees that aren't accounted for in that. So it really comes down to the money. It's about the circle and the continuation of the circle.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is.
So,
Unfortunate.
what are some of the apparent flaws that you see in the current immigration system?
So first, let's talk about the irony in the system. From there, we can talk about the flaws, and from there we can talk about the reforms. So the irony in the system is usually usually when the students go for the student visa interviews in the consulates, usually people advise them, if they get the intention that you're going to stay in the US, they're not going to approve your student visa, the consulate officer. So it's always, they would reply like, I'll be coming back. I'll be coming back to my home country. But the irony is, if that is your intention, why would you allow 20,000 H1Bs for advanced degrees? And let's go to the second irony. The second irony is like, if H1B is a guest worker, why would you make it a dual intent? And if you make it a dual intent, and I mean, in the process, you already proved that no one is like there to replace your position, and then no green card, right? Like, and then you have
Right.
to prove again on the green card. And the irony is, if they are the guest workers, why would you collect the social security tax from them? They are guest workers, right? You keep people who oppose all this, they keep shouting like, you're the guest workers, you are supposed to go back. Then why would you collect the social security tax? And this is like, we are the victims, but we face like name calling, everything. Like, I mean, like, that's the irony in the system, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
government needs to be really clear and honest about their intentions. They want the immigrants or they don't want. You
Mm-hmm.
can't make the system like as the points I mentioned. These are INEs. There could be tons of INEs over there. You need to be clear
Mm-hmm.
with first, if you're doing anything for the reform. First, you need to know what your intentions are, right? If you don't know what your mission is, what your goal is, you can't achieve that. So you need to
Mm-hmm.
be clear. What is your honest intentions? They need to be honest. If corporate is doing that, I don't mind. It's the corporate after all. But the
Mm-hmm.
government should be really clear on what they are trying to achieve. I
Yeah.
feel like I feel like even when I go to the consulates, right? I feel like a consulate. I'm sorry to say, I hope nothing would happen to my visa. I feel like consulate officers. I don't feel I feel they're very detached with the values that we follow in America. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't see in them. I don't see in them. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it, when you live in here, you know the values we follow in US, but I feel they're so detached with the values. And
Hmm.
like, so those are the INEs, right? So let's talk about USCIS or DHS.
Yeah.
Okay, any system to work in any organization, right? It should have predictability, accountability, and value to the customer. Unfortunately, they have none. There is no predictability. They have no accountability. They don't value the customer. Let me give you an example. This is a really sad story. Like a few years back, they have moved the dates. So then there is this woman who has aborted because they have moved the dates. She has to vaccinate because when your priority date gets current, you have to vaccinate. So
Mm-hmm.
she can't vaccinate when she's pregnant. She has to abort the pregnancy. And what happened is later they retrograded the dates. And I think
Mm-hmm.
around 20 people they went to court, but then they lost it.
Mm.
Like removing the dates, right? There is no predictability. Do you see the predictability? If there is a multiple lines, if there is a
Mm-hmm.
multiple lines, how can you even predict, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't understand. Like, have you ever seen in any progressive countries a system where, like, you get a priority date, once you pass the date, how would it matter? Like, you can apply anytime. Once your date is once you pass the date, you should be able to apply anytime you want. I
Right.
mean, like you can't do that. If you don't do it, it would retrograde. I'll give you an example of my cousin. My cousin went to a good school here, and she's been in US for 16 years. She recently lost the job, but then she found it. She found a very good job, but her problem is she's very scared. Like they already missed twice. What if the dates move?
Mm-hmm.
When she has to reapply her labor and I-140, what if the dates move? Have you ever seen anywhere in the world having the system like that? When your past date, how does it matter? Like that's your eligibility date. You pass that
Mm.
eligibility date. I mean, like any system would allow you to apply. Usually, in any progressive countries, like you take Singapore, like any progressive countries, like if you're applying for permanent residency, usually they'll give you after 5 years you're eligible. After you lived in this country for 5 years, you're eligible. Once you're eligible, it's up to you when you want to apply. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter like on the day. So all this is happening because like we are making the reservations for the unknown demand. We have
Mm-hmm.
multiple lines for each country. Can you show multiple lines in any country based? I'm talking about the progressive countries. I'm not talking about. I can only compare this with any advanced countries, right? So
Mm-hmm.
anything. And have you ever seen any any organization, DHS and USCIS, any immigration organizations in advanced country getting sued so many times as like DHS and USCIS? They'll just bring up some random rule, they get sued, and they waste the taxpayer money for defending all the lawsuits. They just do something that's not in the Congress, and they keep getting sued, and then they have to. They're wasting the taxpayer
A double
money.
standard really is what we've
Uh-huh.
seen with them a good bit. You know that's
Mhm.
been over specifically surrounding information technology services
Mhm.
organizations and kind of their interpretation of that.
Mhm.
But you know you said something very interesting, and you know I wanted to just kind of backtrack and hit on that, which is you talked about the 20,000 for advanced U.S. degrees, and I'm just going to give a little kind of sneak peek for tomorrow. I am gonna have a post coming out talking about H1B denials, and one of the things that this research paper hits on that's very interesting, and you don't hear this a lot, and that is 20% of full-time advanced degree enrollees in STEM um, are U.S. born. So that means 80% of all students that are full-time students in advanced STEM degrees in U.S. institutions are foreign nationals. Why do you think that is, Rational Woman? What's your thought on that?
So I recently heard an argument in Twitter. So one of the reason is, so after a few years, uh, after India and China, Nigeria is going to take that place. You know why? Because of the population, right? Like when you have so much population, they have to work hard. They have to strive hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't stop them. Like actually, the higher population would drive them. Would drive them for the sustainability. Like so, they have to do that. I mean, today it would be India and China. It's going to be
I think
Nigeria
it's
pretty
China,
soon.
India are 1, 2.
Mhm,
South Korea was pretty high on that list at one point. I
mhm,
don't know if they still are, but yeah, I mean China is one and India is two. And I want to say the
mhm,
numbers that I saw, China literally doubled India, and
mhm,
that's just enrollees and advanced degree for STEM. This data.
mhm. So, yeah, if you're talking about the reform, so it should not be like CIR. I think many of the senators, I personally feel, now most of them, I would not like to say none of them. Most
Mm-hmm.
of them don't have in-depth knowledge. Even when they
Yeah.
talk about CIR, so when they talk about CIR, they are trying to think on in the lines of the existing system. How to make
Mm-hmm.
the existing system better? How to make the patch up? No, dismantle. Like I mean, you need to you need to rebuild everything. Like you need to
Mm-hmm.
start thinking on the humanitarian, social, and economic values. You should not copy paste the immigrant, even if they're talking about merit paste, it should not be like
Mm-hmm.
copy paste from Canada, New Zealand, or somewhere,
Right.
right?
Yeah, it
They
needs to be
should,
different.
yeah, they should understand what's important for the country. I think none of the senators are paying attention. It's either patch up, or just
Mm-hmm.
fix the things that's in there, or like copy paste from Canada or somewhere. Uh, so it should, like I have like few points I would think what would make the system better.
Yeah,
I mean,
what kind of reform would you like to see? I think that would mutually benefit immigrants and Americans.
yeah, so we have to think in terms of, we have to for sure think the merit based. Merit based doesn't mean like the one that's floating around. I even see the one that is floating around is not a good one either. Like they have
Mm-hmm.
to think even the better, like better terms. So so H1B is 65,000 every year, right? That I feel funny, right? So
Right.
then the inflow should be based on some dynamic formula, not static numbers. So the GDP or economy is not same every year. Why should it be static? Why
Right.
shouldn't it be based on some formula that the lawmakers design?
Yeah,
Why should?
we're talking about an annual adjustment based
Mhm,
on fiscal year GDP, right?
mhm.
And yeah, and that
And
gets into merit based, right? I mean, I think that when you start talking about annual adjustments, right?
mhm, mhm. So if you're allowed, so and you're when you're providing the green card, permanent residency, that number shouldn't be static either. It should be
Mm-hmm.
based on the number. Why don't you have a formula to calculate the inflow of the visas that you issued, dual intent
Mm-hmm.
visas like H1, L1, or anything that would lead to employment-based green card?
Mm-hmm.
Why it should be some dynamic formula? It shouldn't be static like numbers, like I'll give you 100,000, or like you don't have to give 100,000, you can even give only 50,000, but that should be based on the economy and the number of visas that you issued that year, or like the earlier year, or like 2 3 years
Mm-hmm.
before. It should be based on some dynamic, but definitely, as I said, not static. And I
Mm-hmm.
would like, the main thing is like I would like to remove any immutable factors in the immigration reform, like not just country of birth, anything else, everything, like anything related to immutable factors shouldn't be there at all to begin with. And then, as I said, like I would like to see USCIS and DHS to be dismantled and rebuilt in a better shape without
Mm-hmm.
much broad authority. They shouldn't be given broad authority. They should, I mean, DHS, I'm only talking on terms of immigration, not the
Mm-hmm.
security or something on the
Yeah, right,
immigration.
right, right.
They should be only, and implementation bodies for what Congress is written. And
Mm.
Congress should be, when they're writing, they even have to be specific about the implementation. Let me give you an example. Congress can say like EADs need to be given to H4 dependents, but these DHS bodies, even for printing the card, if it is taking 9 months, so you have to even like how the process, how the implementation should be. I think when they are writing a bill, they should be it should be even granular to the level of implementation. It should be just an implementation body without the broad authority. That's what I think. And
Hmm.
as like in any other developed nations, you should give permanent residency after you pay taxes and being legally here after certain years, like 5 years or 10 years or 7 years. You decide the time, right? So I mean, it doesn't make sense like based on the dates and numbers. All this is a messy system. You live here for certain years and you spend you I mean, you pay taxes, I mean, you've been fine with the clean records, just provide the permanent residency.
Hmm.
And one more thing, abolish all lotteries. Funny
Yeah.
thing is, H1 lottery, diversity visa lottery, all the lotteries, you're inviting people, just random lottery, really? Like,
Hmm.
that is so funny. And
Hmm.
I see like, and one more thing is like bureaucracy, too many middle layers. If the system is simple, like in Canada and Australia, I don't even need the immigration lawyers. Recruiters can do that. You might do that, right? I think you know a lot more than many of the immigration lawyers over there. I'm sure you know more than that. Why should be the whole money and whole power is in the ILA like immigration lawyers hand? Power
Hmm.
should be redistributed. There should not be too many layers
Hmm.
and make the process simple, right? So, and I mean, last but not the least, when they're writing the next bill, I feel like they should include a mandatory clause where they
Hmm.
would be reviewing the bill every 5 years or like
Hmm.
6 years, whatever. Like they decide the time. There should be a revision provision for the bill in the bill.
So, kind of getting into that, right? We're talking about, you know, benefits that you provide, right? You as an individual, and you know, you're a developer working in FDLC, kind of full stack, right? As we talked about at the beginning. But apart from being, highly skilled, what kind of social, cultural, economic value do you as an individual bring to the U.S.?
So, if you see most of the research, like I have citations too, if you see most of the crime would be narrowed down, attributed to the two factors that would be education and poverty, right?
Mm,
So, as a high skilled immigrant, we are already coming into the country with the skill, and we do make money here. I mean, like I mean, like, fortunately, this land has given us opportunity. We make
right.
money here. We have
Well
skills.
compensated.
Hmm. So the crime in this highly skilled backlog folks are like really less, if you see, and because we make money here, as one of your previous posts, you mentioned about the EB5 investor visas, like people
Yeah, the
who made
the
money.
$1.8 million required.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, we make money here. We want to invest here. We are very. I mean, we many of us, like even I have that entrepreneurial spirit. Like many of us wanted to start the jobs here.
Right.
Many of us want to do that.
Yeah, create your own company,
Mm-hmm.
create jobs for others. Yeah, no, I mean, I think, just in my experience, and I don't let you continue, but my experience with the vast majority of H1B visa holders, particularly from India, is that they are very financially conservative.
Mm-hmm.
They invest, they reinvest, they save, they send, they ship,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's a lot of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I also want to point we are good Samaritans too. Like if you see me, I have volunteered in an organization for a whole 1 year, paying from my own pocket. Like the commuting expenses.
Mm-hmm.
I've volunteered in organization for a whole year from like Monday to Friday, 8 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
to 5 p.m. as if I go to job. Like we try to be we try to bring the socially cultural economic value to the society. We try to do
Mm-hmm.
that. I'm not saying like other immigrants won't do that, but each immigrant has their unique cultural value that they bring in. We do,
Right.
like them, we do have a cultural value that we do bring in here. Yeah, so as you can see, we have a good fighting spirit. That's what we bring in.
Right.
You see,
Absolutely.
we are not, we are
Very,
not
very
really.
creative and adaptable has also been, my experience. And that's very blanketed, but that's just been my experience across the board with the Indian culture. Very adaptable, very creative, very much problem solvers, right? And I think that just is something that's rooted at a very young age. So, want to turn our attention a little bit to, I think probably the hottest topic right now in immigration here in the U.S., right? And there's a lot of extremes on both sides of this debate, but you've been very outspoken on Senate Bill, 386, and I wanted to ask you, why is it important to your future?
Of course, I mean, like to begin with, can we sustain 1 more year without S386? It's very hard. I mean, it's even, I think like many of us who sustained the 2008 recession, like people who are like 2009 dates, like people who have come before 2008 recession, people have survived recession, pandemic, but it's still going. After pandemic, I think everything is going to change. It's going to be even more hard. It's not going to be easy. Can we sustain without SPA? I would say no, because we have waited long enough. Every day there is a death. Every day the children's age up. All that we are asking is the equality. I mean, like asking for more green cards. As I said, we are second-class citizens, right? I can only ask for justice, right? I can't ask for more green cards. I wish more citizens could go and ask for green cards so that it would help us. But all that's in my hands is like asking for justice, asking for equality. So for sure, like I mean, like when people who argue the country caps are good for diversity, I mean, they don't understand why there is no country caps on DACA or TPS or T1 and N1. But T1N visas are like they issue thousands of T1N visas. They come here directly work without any vetting, right? Is that only our skin color that's bothering them, or
Mm,
like and see, H1? Like I mean, H1 you been vetted multiple times, right? Like you have to meet the wage levels, everything. For T1N, TPS, anything you don't need any of those things, but
mm-hmm.
I- so this H1B has become money making process for many of the people over there. So
Right.
that's why they make it a big issue.
Extremely valuable.
And also the dark, I would say like people like, I mean, then if you have to talk about the Senator Scott's argument, I would
Mm-hmm.
say if in future Congress allows the DACA kids to obtain path to citizenship for the employment,
Mm-hmm.
then it's going to be really hard for Mexican kids. They don't understand. If the country cap is going to stay on, it's us now today. It's us now for the lawyers, money making people.
Mm-hmm.
Tomorrow it's going to be the same people that he has mentioned in the article. So I mean, if the DACA kids are allowed to pass to citizenship through employment, then it's going to be really hard if the country cap is going to stay because many of them are from Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, and also like I would like to mention this. If you, I don't know if you know this, the previous co-sponsors for this bill is Jason Sharpes and Representative Kevin Yoder, and
Mm-hmm.
now it's a Democratic congresswoman from California. So
Mm-hmm.
this bill has been always bipartisan. This
Mm-hmm.
bill is non-controversial to begin with. It's a hugely
Mm-hmm.
bipartisan. but they made it a controversy because, as you said, it's $1 billion industry where they would be losing the money.
Right.
And one more thing I would like to mention. See, this is the age-old trick, victim shaming, right? That's why many of the rape survivors would never speak up. That's what they do. Here we are victims of the system, and we've been shamed and abused and name called as a cheap labor, so that we don't
Mm-hmm.
talk. They don't want us to talk. So, uh, yeah. Yeah, this is age-old trick. So, but people is not going to shut up anymore.
Yeah. And Monday I put out a video on, will 386 pass? And my answer was no. And I posted that video around 2 or 3 o'clock Eastern time, and then 4 o'clock, about a little after 4 o'clock Eastern time, is when that op-ed piece from Senator Scott hit the Miami Herald.
Mm.
And my answer, not to spoil it for anyone who hasn't watched that video, but my answer was no. 386 won't pass, even if it hits the floor again and sometime after September 8th. I just don't think that the current administration wants to unblock it. They're going to use a political favor from Senator Scott to keep it blocked. And then when that op-ed piece dropped on Monday, it's a very harsh reality. And I hate that I'm right, but that piece tells me that I am, and that nothing is going to happen on 386 coming up in the next session, leading into the election, and even after it, and that it will die in 2020. And I wish I was wrong on that, and there's still a possibility that I could be, but all signs point to that I'm not. And I hate to be that voice, because, as you know, I support 386. I support clearing the backlog. I think that it's atrocious. I think that a 7% cap on country of origin is racist, and I don't like that word, but it just is, especially when we're talking about employment-based preferences.
But I still, so when you said like it's racist, that's true. Like my previous coworker, he literally said he is from. I don't want to mention which country he's from, but he
Yeah,
has really mentioned like there are too many of you. That's
right,
what Senator Mikey mentioned. That's a racist. Like too many of you, saying too many of you is racist, right?
right,
So
right.
but then, as I said, like I still have confidence. I'm sorry, I have to
Yeah, you
because
should. Hope is key, right? And
yeah,
listen, I'd prefer to be wrong. Can I just being honest? I'd prefer to be wrong on that. I just would, but I just when I look at the political landscape, I don't think I am. So,
mhm.
how long do you think you would stay in the U.S. if 386 were to fail, or if we didn't see some other type of reform in 2021 addressing the green card backlog?
I would. I will, everything is in the air. I said everything is in the air, but I wouldn't be. I would not go to any other country if the day happened when I have to leave here. I'll just go back to India. I have no plans of
Sure.
like going back anywhere.
You wouldn't consider Canada or Australia or Singapore, as
Uh,
you mentioned, or New Zealand?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay.
Unfortunately, no. India do
Yeah.
have like a lot of opportunities right now. As you
Yep.
know, like you have seen like Jeff Amazon CEO going there.
Huge,
Facebook.
huge
Yeah,
amount, right?
yeah. So yeah, it's a land of opportunity. I mean, it's becoming a land of opportunities too. But then, as I said, like I have, so already we left their home. So if again we have to leave this home, I think going back home would give us peace of mind than going anywhere else.
Yeah. Well, as we talked about earlier, 2017 was kind of that line where a lot of folks started to make decisions on whether they were going to make changes and consider other locations. So.
Hmm.
Well, that's all the questions that I had for you. We're at the halfway point here. I just wanted to ask anyone, if you're currently watching, if you haven't already, if you go ahead and like this video. It helps us to get boosted in the YouTube algorithm for live streams that are currently out there. But what we're going to do now is we're going to take a quick pivot. I'm going to allow Rational Woman to ask me some questions, and then I definitely want to get to the Twitter questions that have come in, and I've got a few questions from YouTube that we'll cover too. So, Rational Woman, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. It's my turn now. So my first question is going to be, so I know, I mean, like when you have interacted, I know that you've worked as a recruiter for 16 years. I would like to know, like, do you really see demand for STEM professionals? Or is it fake or like real?
You know, it's interesting when we talk about perm labor filings and what is required for perm labor, right? We talk about education and minimum requirements, right? But
Mm-hmm.
if I'm being honest, I don't know if a degree is as relevant as experience. But what the degree does do is it says that you've gone to school and you've been educated in computer science, computer engineering, electrical engineering. I really believe that anyone can teach themselves to code and script and use libraries. Even I can. I'm not technical. I'm not a developer, but I figured out how to do a lot of things here in the last few months that I never thought that I could. But the
Mm-hmm.
facts are, some folks are just better at developing and coding and programming than others. So the question becomes, why is that? And I think we start to look at the training and the education that takes place and the feeding system that has been really implemented in India, in China in some cases, and of course other areas. But specifically, when we're talking about India, we're talking about programming classes at a very young age, and unfortunately, we're just not doing that. But for STEM, yes, I think it is a driving factor in our economic growth because of what it covers, right? You're talking about sciences, technology, engineering, mathematics, and what those cover, right? Data analytics, data science, artificial intelligence, robotics. I mean, these are all things that, if we think about what the future holds, STEM is going to be a big part of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So my next question for you, third-party hiring, usually, I mean, acting as a middle layer is typically seen as bad. I think mostly it's because of this H1B thing. But do you see genuine need for companies in doing so? Like you, I mean, would you mind sharing your experiences?
Yeah, so I mean, as you mentioned, 16 years as a technology recruiter. I'm still a recruiter at heart. But one of the things I learned to do is build relationships with third party vendors who have access to a different candidate pool, right? Large enterprise organizations that are filling consultant based needs for project based initiatives are doing so a lot of times with third party based consultants that are generally on an H1B. So I think it's critical. I honestly, if you were to ask me, I think that this component, the third party component, is critical. But what I will tell you is that relationships always win, right? So recruiters like me that have relationships with the best third parties or the third parties that have access to the best talent, um, they're going to win. It's a give and take, right? And the give is this: as a recruiter, I have access. But as a third party, guess what they also have? They have access and they have a relationship. And so it's a very symbiotic, sort of incestual relationship that happens between staffing firms and between
Mhm.
third party consultants and third party subcontract organizations. I've talked about on this channel a good bit the death of the third party and what that could look like and what that impact would be. Um, but I'm pro third party. I hope that message has been clear. But I think that there needs to be some adjustment and reform on what the third party outplacements look like.
Yeah, I think there should be. Yeah, so this, I think after this administration, I think third-party hiring has been hard to right?
Hmm.
They'll do something like that
But third
because
parties have also been kind of the biggest organizations accused of fraud as well, right? So I mean,
mm,
It isn't without guilt, right? And unfortunately, a couple of bad eggs, right, create a misconception that's generally put in a designation for others that may not be accurate. I can tell you that some relationships that I developed with some third party organizations were very genuine. They're friendships.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, my other question, next question for you. So, in your 16 years of career, is there any
Hmm.
instance where you found an excellent resource? You think, oh,
Hmm.
he's the candidate, but hiring was really complicated with immigration?
Yeah, I mean, I could probably give you one of 25 to 30 examples of this. I mean, any case that was filed in the HCAP lottery year over year had a 50-50 chance of being selected. So, you file 6 cases, 3 are going to be picked. You file 10, 5 are going to be picked, right? You follow me? Um, but there was this Java developer that worked for a large financial institution that was in India, and I met him through LinkedIn, and literally, I had multiple clients that would hire this guy, would be willing to say yes, I have a spot for him, right? Um, fintech, financial technology is in such demand. Particularly, I am in Atlanta metro. Financial technology is one of the driving factors in our tech sector here in Atlanta. And this individual had perfect communication. I tried twice in the
Mm-hmm.
HCAP lottery to get him an H1B visa, and he wasn't selected both times. And when you think about what that means, all the time spent, right? But the fees, I mean, literally $4,000 plus as an employer that had really no return.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's true. So, what kind of immigration reform would help recruiters to find the best talent and make the hiring process easier? And
You know,
yeah.
I thought about this question a lot when you and I, spoke earlier, and we kind of covered what we were going to discuss today. And I think this question and the next one are two that I really want to hit hard. Um, but this one, my answer is pretty simple because I really, in the next question, want to really get into what I mean by this. And so I think the thing that would make it easiest for recruiters, for candidates, and for employers would be the freedom to choose who you work for, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I
Mm-hmm.
mean by that is that if you want to work for a third party on their W 2 on a corp to core basis, okay. If you want to work on my W 2 direct at my client, okay. If you want to work direct for the client, they want to pay you a perm salary, okay. But there needs to be some restrictions around what that type of work authorization is and what that provides. But I think it comes down to the freedom to choose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. See, the freedom to choose would help uh, both the immigrants. It's going to help. It is going to protect the American workers, and it also helps the recruiters' job easy, right?
Right?
But no one want to do that.
No, too much money on the other side, right?
Yeah. Uh, so yeah, again, in that terms, so you would think the same reform would also help the third party hiring easier.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it comes down to work authorization freedom, right? And what is that? And so, um, I mentioned on Monday, and there's been a lot of chatter on Twitter about this I-140 EAD, right? You've heard about it.
Mm-hmm.
I would prefer the designation, and maybe it's under some sort of merit-based system, but I like the term H-1B EAD. I just do. That's maybe because I came up with it. But I like the concept of an H-1B EAD based on merit. And the thing that may be controversial, and you mentioned paying into Social Security and what that means, but I think if we want to talk about bridging the gap, okay, bridging the gap between the factions, the American workers, American first faction, right, and Indian nationals. Let's just kind of really call it what it is. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there's if we look at putting in this H1B EAD under a merit-based system, we may need to look at some sort of restrictions for unemployment benefits, right? And that may be controversial and that may not be fair. That may be considered second class. But I think what we have to do if we're going to have bipartisanship is look at what is the give and take, right? So if the give is that I give you an H-1B EAD, which is an advanced parole document, which gives you freedom of travel and freedom to choose who you work for, there has to be some sort of take. And what's the take, right? And I think it comes down to the unemployment benefit designation, as we've seen kind of through this pandemic and what it's created. But the last thing that I'd like to see too is a path to residency. So we can look at this H-1B EAD designation, but I also think that if chosen by the individual as dual intent, then there needs to be some sort of clearly defined path as well.
Yeah, that's an awesome idea. I'm hearing first time H1B EAD. That sounds so good. Yeah, so yeah, you've already, as you mentioned, so you think the employers not tying up with the employers would make the process easy, right?
Right.
So,
yeah, I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would like to ask you one more question. As many anti-H1Bers claim, do you think H1Bs are cheap labor?
I did an interview a few weeks ago for a reporter, and I don't know where that story has gone or if it will ever go out, but one of the points that I made in closing was this: H-1Bs are not the enemy. They're not. As individuals, they are not. The enemy comes down to the individual organizations and government that has their hand in the fees associated with it and kind of the restrictions that come along with that. So I would say that answer is no. I don't view H-1Bs as cheap labor. I think that, there was a recent study that came out, and some more on this tomorrow, but it said that H-1Bs actually are making more than their U.S. counterparts in the same occupation. So I think that dispels a pretty big myth, right, that's out there, that H-1Bs are cheap labor, that they undercut U.S. salaries. If you look at, one of the videos from last week where we covered last Friday from the news, where we covered what is the annual salary for H-1B petitions that were approved for a software engineer. And so this was across the country. The average salary was over $100K for a software engineer. Software developers, on the other hand, it was like $85,500. So what's the difference? Really, it comes down to title and degree, right? And those requirements, right? What's the requirement of the position? Does it require 5 years of X or 3 years of something else? And so I will tell you, an 85K job right now sounds pretty great to a lot of people. Okay. So to say that cheap labor undercutting salaries, I don't necessarily agree that that's the case. I think that the freedom, going back to the freedom to choose, right, will eliminate that argument. Because if you have a choice really to say, today I'm not going to work for this employer anymore, I'm going to go work for someone else. Right now, there's a lot involved in that for you making that decision, right? But if you have that freedom to choose, it completely ends the cheap labor debate. And we can end that based on merit.
Exactly. You said it right. I want to make a point here. Like a few years back, I read somewhere on the average, the citizens or permanent residents would change their jobs every 3 years. It's the indentured servitude that's what making the foreign H-1Bs attractive more than general notion of the cheap labor. It's So they know, like, you can't go anywhere, even if you're working an extra hour. If they make you work an extra hour every day, they know, like, you're not going to quit job just for working an extra hour every day. But still, like, when you compare, like, and someone making $130,000 or something like that, an hour per hour. So that would be a good savings for the company, right?
Right.
Still,
Right.
yeah. Uh, so let me go to my last question.
Yeah, sure.
So, due to the pandemic, working from anywhere has become the normal,
Hmm.
as what we hear every day in the news. As
Right.
a recruiter, what changes are you anticipating in the recruiting industry in
Hmm.
respective to the STEM industry that you guys serve?
Mm. I think what we've learned through the quarantine period and honestly through the new remote lifestyle is that the nomad sort of occupation or lifestyle, if you will, is in the here and now. I mean, I think we had seen this explosion on remote work, then we had seen the come back to the office, and then all of a sudden, here we are again, right?
Mhm.
And, I think if we're talking about what changes do I anticipate, I mean, I think it comes down to more organizations are open to individuals who can't interview in person, right? Um, I could tell you how many times I found a great candidate that was a good fit for a job, but they weren't local and they could only do phone, video, Skype, Zoom, right? Um,
Mhm.
and the old style of hiring was I want to see what they look and smell like in person, right? And I hate to say it like that, but that's just this human element. Look, smell, touch, those things that happen in person, and reading body language, right? Um, so I think that's how the shift has happened. I mean, if you look at how recruiting teams are now disparate across the country, they're no longer siloed regionally. That's a big change in what's happened. So
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I think that has been the pivot and the shift in the recruiting industry is that it doesn't matter where I sit, it matters where the job is, and it matters if they're open to the candidate being local, on site, or remote. Um, but I want to make one last point on this because I know a lot of our audience is H1B. Of course, I'm the H1B guy, right? So hopefully, vast percentage of the folks that are watching this now live are going to watch this at some point in the future. I want to make a point. Listen to me right now, okay? I want you to make sure that your LCA has your home residence listed because what you do not want to happen is ICE to come knocking at your door and you don't have an LCA for your home residence. I know that sounds like a big pain, and I know you may not want to go to your employer on it, but if you're working more than 50% right now from your home residence, you need to have an LCA for it.
That's an awesome piece of advice. See, we don't need the lawyers. We can just have some recruiters.
You got me for free tonight, right? That's how it works. So
Yes, and thank you very much for
yeah,
that.
no. So I posted earlier on Twitter that you and I were going to be going live, and I've got a bunch of questions. I want to roll through these really quickly. We're on an hour here. There's a couple through YouTube, so I'd like to kind of cover these if we can very quickly. So I'll just read them. I'll discuss them, and if there's something that you want to hit on, feel free. I'll answer it, and then you can speak up if you want to drive home a point. Okay. So this is from at Dasan Garov. And he says, I have questions around H4 EAD. Will an alternate interim solution like I-140 EAD provide a work permit path for H4 spouses? I, I don't know. I mean, you've started to see this term I-140 EAD thrown around to help alleviate the backlog so that you have a W-2 work authorization. I would hope that if your H4 is in EAD, that they would be considered or at least be able to maintain the H4 EAD. But as I alluded to earlier, the H1B AD kind of under a merit-based system. Of course, spouses are evaluated in merit-based system and given authorization. So at some point, hopefully in the next 10 to 15 years, we see something like that. Um, Rational Woman, you have anything on that?
Yeah, you covered it all.
So the next one is from at Raja Krishna 22, and he says, "My question is, what alternatives do we have? S386 is not the solution going forward to solve GC backlog problem. Will there be any temp release like EAD for I-140 approved folks and travel document? Will there be respite for the never-ending H-1B extensions for now?" And again, it goes back to this idea of the H-1B EAD and it having advanced parole options. It gives you that freedom and relief of the travel anxiety and the constant need to go through consular appointments on every extension or if your I-94 is expired. So I think hopefully, right, we see something like that. I don't think we're going to see in the next few months, but hopeful for 2020, that we have some sort of reckoning around a merit-based system. Anything on that one?
I really have no hopes. Even I'm sorry to say this. That's why I'm more advocating on ST86.
Yeah.
If you see, like Trump has talked about the evil, like a couple of months back, and there is no sign of it anymore.
Right.
So I think it become more like political. I mean, like no one would care to fix the system, and it's really hard because the House is with the Democrats and the Senate is with the Republicans. I think even the next 4 years also it's very tough. I would suggest people if you want to make any plans leaving to Canada, Australia, I would suggest them like be in that lines.
Yeah. So the next one is from at Zylu0306. Kind of confused with all the lawsuits. If I work for a U.S. subsidiary based in Europe, my company wants to transfer my role to the U.S., I would be a new L1 applicant, but I've been working in my role before January 22nd proclamation. Can I qualify based on current rules? So I did a follow-up question. I just wanted to understand some more, and they provided some more context, which says, asking on behalf of my German partner, who is German, works at an office located in Germany that is a subsidiary to the U.S. company. He's been there since January of 2020. So there were some other answers that were thrown out from some other Twitter followers on this one, but I will say that unfortunately, your partner is not eligible for L1 until they've worked for at least a year for the foreign subsidiary. So have to have 12 months under your belt for that organization before they can even begin the application process. And that can take sometimes 6 to 8 months to get an L1. So I think if I'm going to do my math for you, you're looking at August or September of 2021 before an L1 would even be a viable option for you. At EV Guy 7, question: can or should H4 EAD claim unemployment after their EAD expires, resulting in involuntary termination from their job, assuming EAD holder has been working for past 10 years in the States? So, USCIS began accepting H4 EADs on May 26th of 2015. And when it first came out, there was some mention that H4 EADs would be eligible for unemployment benefits as long as the principal foreign worker, so the spouse here that possesses the H1, is still employed. Now, I'm not a HR rep unemployment benefits expert, but I guess it also depends on how long you've paid into the system as well. But my understanding was that that H4s would be eligible for unemployment, but you may want to consult with an ME attorney on that or a HR benefits rep. So at H1 Slave, any updates on October Bulletin and how much dates can move? We hit on the bulletin earlier, which is to say that the dates didn't move from August to September. And with the pending furloughs and the lack of work that's happening right now for USCIS, I don't think that those dates will move again for October. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't foresee that. Rational Woman, any thoughts?
Yeah, there would be a spillover from family activity, as like many lawyers has mentioned in the future. There would be 110K visas that would be spilling over.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, even like the spokesperson or like I don't know if the chairman or deputy chairman from DHS has spoken about that. So there is going to be a spillover, but how much the movement we can expect, that is the hard question. Even DHS doesn't know. So
Right.
as I mentioned earlier, even like, I don't know, they know their numbers.
Yeah, it's I look at those bulletins at the end of every month, and they're always very interesting to me. That's for sure. At Balraj CSC 81, any insight on Trump's EO on immigration? EO's timeline. There was a lot of rumors swirling in the beginning of August about a potential executive order implementing a merit-based immigration system. Unfortunately, I don't foresee that holding up. I think it would take an act of Congress if we were going to implement some type of immigration system like that based on skill based points. But I will say that I think it's very clear based on Senator Scott's blocking of 386, based on him speaking with the White House and them deciding they need more time to understand sort of the impact around it. I think that tells me that they want to punt on the immigration topic until 2021, especially if they think that they're going to win this upcoming election, which I think is 62 days away. I think that they're just going to try to keep the immigration debate at arm's length and try to keep it sort of out of the debates, keep it out of sight, out of mind for the time being, hope that they're reelected, and then really look to make a significant reform overhaul to the system. So I would expect, if reelected, you're probably looking at March or April before we would see some sort of merit-based discussion again. So at RHL 1573-8352 says, I like your analysis videos. However, I think your name handle H1B Guy is too narrow. Doesn't reflect the good work that you're doing. There are all sorts of people in a 100-year GC backlog. H1Bs are just part of that group of about 1 million people. And he continues on, folks here aren't aware of crazy restrictions on H1Bs. One would have to go through the whole process of I-140 approval again if they change jobs, transfer H1B if you go to next town. Doesn't make immigration system any better, fair at all. Just makes ALA rich. 2, irony of cheap labor stats out there. Indians are the richest and most educated immigrant group in the U.S., but we are painted as cheap labor. Roe, who got here in 2018 and making half as us, have already have GC, and they call us, who's paying taxes here since 2008, cheap labor. 3, finally shed some light on those 3 things. I'm pretty sure at Russian Woman's already aware of those things that I listed. All the people in backlog are. Good luck for your YouTube live. Hope you make millions of money and subscribers. And finally, I'd say that there's an unholy alliance of right-wingers and NAI Council to maintain the status quo. I believe right-wingers are brainwashed that S386 would be bad for them if you analyze piece by piece removing country caps from EB will help U.S. workers. So I'll just hit on a couple things, and then I'm going to turn it over to you. I will tell you that the H1B Guy name and handle that came to me in a vision, I'm convicted that that's who I am and what my platform will be. I hope to continue to talk about the H1B and hopefully the H1B AD into the foreseeable future. I will continue to cover all things H1B, as well as other immigration benefits, green card backlog, and really any work authorization or third party. And what I hope is that I know that people are finding me on YouTube through the H1B Guy search. And so while I appreciate it, I like the name. I don't know. What do you think?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Oh, it's absolutely perfect. Why not, right? Just
Right.
because people are calling H1B is bad. No, you can't talk about immigration without H1B, right?
Right.
So,
At least for now, right? No, but I think it just goes back to it's all about the money, right? And the circle that we've talked about and the misconception that H1B is cheap labor when you look at, the hundreds of thousands of petitions that are approved and what the average wages are of those individuals. I mean, you're talking about 85 to 120K generally blanketed across the board. I think that it's just not right. It's something that's used as a crutch. And how many times have I heard I train my H1B replacement who's only making 50K? That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't happen anymore. That's 15 years ago. That doesn't happen because of the prevailing wages and the certifications that go in place and the verification that you have to pay that minimum wage. And if you don't, you're in direct violation of federal law. So I think that that's kind of been the change. You have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, you touched the right point. So yeah, so how to find the balance between protecting the American workers at the same time how we do how we give space for immigrants. That's the challenging part. If immigrants would stop coming to the country, the main I'd like to mention this. The hard hit sector is startups. So the startups initially actually depends on more like personal than the process because the process is not set up. They are very
Hmm.
dependent on the person that they hire. The startups need to they'll be always looking for a good person. It doesn't matter like where they come from. So they because they want to sustain, right? The process is not there. So
Hmm.
once the startups is not going to sustain all the innovation, the tech innovation that's happening is going to be halt, which means in turn everything is going to go down. So
Hmm.
how to find the right balance is the question.
Hmm.
I so yeah, I think they need to come up with certain formulas, everything like how we can find the right balance. Yeah.
Hmm.
What main thing like we protect the workers by liberating the immigrants, right?
Hmm. So we have two more here on Twitter and then just a couple YouTube, and then we're going to wrap this up. So at MD1285 5644 says currently L1 does not have a luxury like extension beyond 5 to 7 years. So 5 years for L1B, 7 years for L1A. With approved I-140 like H1B. The fact that India is backlogged heavily, L1 maxes out and have to self-deport even with approved I-140. Can we push for unconditional EAD, advanced parole for I-140 approved cases in executive order? That's the interesting thing about the L1, and I did a L1B, versus H1B video several weeks ago, where we talked about the L1 is actually the faster track to green card permanent residency than the H1, but it will require you to come here, then leave the country, and then come back. Um, but I think, yeah, I mean, the L1s are also in that 800 to a million individuals that we're talking about in the green card backlog in that pool. So, how do you address that? And I think it comes back to how do you clear the backlog and how do you implement a merit based system that creates fairness and equality for everyone? That's going to be the challenge. And how do we adjust that annually based on the shift in technology, based on the shift in gross domestic, sort of revenue, if you will? Those are all, very significant questions that unfortunately I don't have answers for, but will be interesting to see how it plays out. And then the last thing I have is at Jivan Drago at Jivan Drago. If I leave the U.S. and do not return for a few years, my current H-1B expires. If I want an H-1B later, same employer's current H-1B, will the new H-1B subject to the lottery? So it depends on how long you're outside of the country, and it also depends on how much time you have remaining on your current H1. If you have an approved I-140 and you're going to be working with the same employer, I don't think it would be an issue then for you as long as you had at least a week of time remaining on your H that you had that expired before you left the country. So that's really what it comes back to is that you left the country before your H expired, and I think that you would be able then to file a new H1B with the same employer in consular processing and go through that approval. So once the H was approved, then you make your consulate appointment, get your stamping, and should be able to enter into the country. So I think that would be a possibility, and I don't think you'd have to go into the lottery. So, um, so that's all for Twitter. I'm just going to bring up a couple of the YouTube comments really quickly. Um, so Andy P said it's become a corrupt land of corrupt politicians and home of shady lawyers. I mean, I think it, as we've talked about, it's all about the money. It just is. I wouldn't care if U.S. treated all foreigners as second class citizens like Middle Eastern countries. issue is that people from Pakistan, Bangladesh get GC in a year, and Indians have to wait for 100 years. Funny thing is, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh were one country a few decades ago. Nepal is part of a diversity green card program, but India is not. The immigration system is crazy as hell. And then we were talking about F1s, right? We were talking about why is 20% of F1s, 20% of all full-time students enrolled in advanced degrees F1s. And it talks about, what it takes to get an F1. He said that he was one of them, and then mentions, because we were talking about, well, why is that? And it's that Americans generally want to study, music, fine arts, a lot of different sort of subjects. I mean, I have a business degree, and so I mean, I think it's right. They just choose different paths. Technology in sort of the generations that have come through weren't as important, but I think you're seeing in the younger generation, it's much more important. And then he mentions Go Canada's Way in terms of the merit-based system that we're talking about. Don't reinvent the wheels. The website, a point-based system. Yeah, their express entry program has been, very, very valuable. It's definitely been kind of the standard that in Australia. So, well, those are all the questions we have tonight from Twitter and YouTube. If you're still watching, I think we maybe have 7 or 8 people still watching. I wanted to say thank you. I just wanted to ask you if you could like this video. If you're not subscribed to the H1B Guy, click the bell for notifications. But I just want to say thank you to Rational Woman for joining me tonight for almost an hour and a half. Thank you for taking your time out of your day to come and voice your opinion, to talk with me about H1B, immigrant life, Senate Bill 386, merit-based immigration and reform. Just from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
I mean, I'm very thankful for the support. I'm really thankful and thankful for this country too. It gave me a lot of confidence. I got a unique experience here where you don't get anywhere. I'm grateful for all the bondings, all the friends I made here. I'm grateful for all the experience that I gained here. So, and I'm also thankful for you. Not but not least, I'm very thankful for Senator Mike Lee.
Yeah. I mean, as I've said earlier, I never thought I would politically align with a Republican senator from Utah, but, he leans libertarian, very moderate, and spent 9 years working on immigration. And, Abhijit, I just wanted to say thank you for tuning in and watching. Really appreciate your support and tuning in tonight. And, thanking Rational Woman here as well. As I mentioned, tomorrow afternoon, we'll put out a video on H1B denials that'll cover fiscal year 2009 to 2020 from a research paper that was produced from the National Federation of American Policy. So nonpartisan, non-political organization, very interesting data. Thank you again, Rational Woman. Thank you to everyone who took the time to tune in tonight. We're going to end it now and want to wish everyone a very good evening. This has been the H1B Guy, your global source for all things H1B.
Thank you, Bye-bye.